lectured on EU law. It is in DCU, she lectured in DCU and Hungary. I shall talk today a lot about EU law and the fisheries that Irish waters have been rated by the European Union.
I'd like to thank the organisers of today's conference for this opportunity to speak on this very important question. I am a political scientist who studied the European Union for more than 25 years, and I followed the changes in the European Union as they happened with some academic interest. And it's important to say that I teach and research the EU from a position of kind of independence and a certain level of disinterestedness in the European federalist project. And this means that I'm not what's known as a Jean Monnet lecturer, which means I'm not one of the academics who are willing to be paid by the European Commission, firstly to promote European integration in the delivery of teaching in universities, and secondly to act as PR agents, spreading the EU's point of view in the media and in other fora. I'm also not a politician. Although I share speaking platforms with many who are politically active from across the political spectrum. I have no political agenda to push one way or another in terms of Brexit. However, this conference is not about Brexit per se. This conference is convened to discuss what is in Ireland's interests, given the imminent departure of the UK from the European Union. So I have 3 points to make. One phrase that is often used as a health warning attached to the sale of financial products is that past performance is not an indicator of future results. When I think of examples of policies of the EU, and the three I'll talk about, fisheries, and a little bit about EMU and CSDP, and the behaviours and the decisions of Irish governments in this area that have had severe repercussions for people in Ireland and those beyond our shores, I can't help conclude that past performance is indeed a clear and straightforward predictor of future results. And it's because of this we need to talk about Irexit. So let's discuss the first of the three examples. So fisheries. As an island nation, the main natural resource of Ireland is ownership of some of the most fertile fishing grounds in the world. European Commission figures taken from the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, official database of landed catch, show that Ireland's so-called Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, of marine habitat has provided more than 40 million tonnes of fish to the EEC/EU from 1975 to 2010. To be precise, it's 43,813,716 tonnes. The landed catch is worth €67 billion in 2008's prices, and the total commercial value of that is worth twice that amount, €134 billion. So taken together, Irish fisheries have been worth more than €200 billion over that 35-year period. The Irish government knew of the wealth, goods, employment and value that could be generated from Irish seas, but bowed to EC pressure in membership negotiations, and again over later years, in agreeing to a common fisheries policy that yielded just 8% of that 200 billion wealth to Ireland, €17.6 billion, or an average of about 500 million out of nearly 6 billion per annum in terms of wealth. I have here, being an academic, and in fact, my talk is really kind of putting facts and figures on what Anthony Coughlin had said before. And this is the accession of Ireland to the European communities. It was laid before the Houses of the Oireachtas in 1972. And on page 47 it says, as a member of the Council, we will be in a position to ensure that our national interests in the fisheries sector will be provided for by appropriate arrangements, including the maintenance of special limits. Our small island has lost hundreds of billions as a result of a failure to adhere to that promise, and will continue to in the future. And it's why we need to talk about Irexit. The second point I want to make is about treaties on EMU. The longest serving leader of this country in the roles of Taoiseach and President, Eamon de Valera, was was actually quite open to international or regional cooperation to solve collective problems, which is what the EU was supposed to be about. But he was equally determined to set appropriate limits to the spheres of cooperation to ensure national, ethical and social goals are achieved, saying, and I quote, "For certain items of the task, international action is necessary, but for the change of purpose, the deliberate shaping of economic activity to an ethical and social end is work which each can best advance in his own state. The conditions change from country to country. The problem in the highly industrialized states is very different from that in the states industrially underdeveloped." And that was to the League of Nations on the 23rd of September 1932. And his words are just as relevant today. Joining the euro currency and conceding control over exchange rates, interest rates, coupled with trade policy and financial capital controls as part of the single market, he would never have agreed to this, and no rational, right-thinking Irish government would have agreed to this. States much smaller than Ireland, states about the same size as Ireland, and states much larger than Ireland, namely Iceland, Norway, Denmark and the UK, have all maintained appropriate limits to involvement with the EU or EMU respectively, and Ireland should have followed similar paths. Although smaller states have the same trading rights as larger EU member states, and European Economic Area member states like Norway within the European single market, the balance of the European single currency benefits go to German exporters. The German state bank KfW estimates the German economy would have grown by 50 to 60 billion euros less in 2009 and 2010 without the euro. Germany's aim of protecting the euro and keeping downward pressure on its value through continued membership of the EU's weaker states are riven with tension and do not justify the EU's neo-imperialist interventions, which have resulted in social, political, economic and moral crisis in Ireland, Greece, Cyprus, Spain and Portugal, to mention a few. The ECB and the European Commission pressured the Irish government firstly to accept an 85 billion loan, which it called a bailout, on the 28th of November 2010, in order to, quote, from the Oireachtas, save the euro. And then at the behest of the US Treasury Secretary at the time, Timothy Geithner, who led other G7 finance ministers in a teleconference the week of the 30th of November 2010 to prevent the government from burning unsecured bondholders, which is exactly what they should have done. Once again, the Irish government stop extremely large American financial institutions from paying out on what's called naked credit default swaps, bets that they had made to hundreds of billions in the financial markets. But that's an aside. So once again, the Irish government failed to stand up for Ireland's legitimate interests and agreed to a morally unjust and failed to provide an economically viable solution. Governments hewn for the struggles for independence some 100 years ago would never have agreed to such policies or such so-called bailouts. The imposed EU bailout meant that Ireland's debt-GDP ratio moves from 42% in 2008 to 120% of GDP in 2012, breaking the EU's own rules on debt-GDP ratios. EU-driven austerity measures involved laying off people in the public service, pay cuts and freezes for those still employed, with new income taxes and levies on salaries and pensions, billions of euros worth of cuts in public expenditure for health services, education, welfare and infrastructure, and privatisation and sale of state assets such as water, forestry, land and energy. Irish society has been devastated. Many people unable to receive healthcare died while on years-long waiting lists for treatment, while the Irish government savagely cut €2 billion a year from the national health budget. Young people graduating college and those with young families emigrated to find employment in Canada and Australia at a rate of 1,000 people a week, and almost 475,000 people left the country between 2008 and 2014, keeping unemployment to a peak at 15%. Now, 17.5% of Irish-born people over the age of 15 live abroad. and that is the highest proportion in the OECD. And finally, the Irish Central Statistics Office suggests